Hello and welcome to another live problem-solving exercise from the best move. In this case, it is white's move, and the question for this problem is white equal, better, or worse, and what is white's best move? So the question presupposes that neither side is winning, which makes sense because it seems like a bit of a positional case here. It's kind of unlikely that there's a tactical blow to completely knock black out here. This is a really interesting position to me, and it seems fairly complex. I wouldn't be surprised if black's previous move here had been this pawn from b6 to b5. I don't have the game score, so I don't know if that's the case, but it seems very possible. In any event, the pawn being here on b5 takes some control of c4 and prevents white from pushing his pawn to c4 and generally from controlling these light squares like he might like to. And so the end result is that this pawn on b5 kind of creates a nice hole on the square d5 for black. So if it were black's move here, my first instinct is that I would immediately play knight to b6, and then I have the option of playing that knight onto d5 or possibly to c4, and that seems pretty appealing to me. It's an interesting position here. This b pawn being forward does also weaken black's queen side, which is where his king is now, so I kind of think of it as his king side. He's weakening the side where his king is here, but it seems a little unlikely that white can really take advantage of it. Just for example, if we push pawn to c4, the exchange of pawns that would result would allow black the option to attack just as much as white. So it's hard for me to believe that it's too weakening here, although the pawn being forward on b5 does weaken c5, but black seems to have enough control of that square to counter the weakness of the square. So, what to play here? Well, my first thought is white has this beautiful centralized position with these two rooks and his queen, also his knights are on a nice central spaces, although the knights and the light squares do seem a little vulnerable to black's queen. But I want to take advantage of this centralization, and so my first thought is maybe I can push d5. I don't know if I can get it in here, but if I want to play this d5 move, which might be effective, I would need to play it now, because if I wait and black could get in knight b6 and knight d5, then I'm in trouble. Although I should point out, I just realized knight b6, while desirable, isn't possible for at least a moment, because that would allow white to just play queen takes b5. So in any event though, let's see what happens after pawn to d5. So it seems to me that black would really want to take on d5. If black doesn't take on d5, I would expect that after pawn captures on e6, pawn captures on e6, that white would simply be a lot better because of the looseness of these pawns in the center and the fact that his rooks and his queen are so well lined up on these pawns. It may also be possible, if black doesn't take, to push pawn to d6, which seems good as well. So after d5, I think not taking on d5 would leave black with a lot of weaknesses at a minimum. So that it seems like he needs to take on d5. It seems that way. So if black takes on d5, obviously he can't take with the queen, he would have to take with this pawn. And my first thought is that even if I don't have a straightforward continuation, these pawns that black has are just so weak that this has to be good just as a positional pawn sacrifice. Pawn d5, e d5, and even if I played something like knight d2, which is crazy, I think that black's pawns are so weak that I would still like white's position. But after pawn d5, e d5, it seems to me like this knight going to c3 looks extremely strong at first glance. The knight's threatening to take on b5 or d5, and also the queen and rook are ganging up on that loose pawn that black has acquired on d5. To carry that out further, after d5, ed, knight c3, the queen is attacking e7, so that bishop really has to move, it seems like to me, and so the bishop probably is going to play to b4. Now from b4, that bishop will attack the knight on c3 and will have a pin on the rook on e1, which is annoying because it means that we can't play knight takes d5 or knight takes b5 without a sacrifice. I'm not sure we want to do that. So how would we follow up there? It seems so tempting, but after d5, ed, knight c3, bishop b4, I'm not sure where my best move is. I don't know. I don't see the answer that I'm looking for here. I can't play like rook takes d5. I don't seem to be getting away, I don't think, with knight takes b5 or knight takes d5 or queen takes b5. All of them look a little silly to me. So d5, ed, knight c3, and bishop b4. Alright, and the knight's loose. I need to move it. I got a pin on the rook on e1. That's really annoying. Oh, the knight's not loose. He can take on c3 and I'll always be able to recapture, but I would fracture my own queenside pawns, which seems very stupid to me. I couldn't conceive of white being better in that position. So it seems like I need to defend the knight on c3. I don't see a great defense. I mean, I can play like rook d3, or I can play queen e3. I can play queen d3, but none of them are inspiring great confidence. And if I play one of those moves, like I drop something into d3, then there's suddenly knight c5 for black, which hits that piece that just moved to d3, and that looks really unpleasant. I'm not finding it here. It doesn't look to me like after d5, ed, knight c3, bishop b4, I've got a good way of dealing with that pin on the rook on e1. Yeah, I don't see it. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the answer and then there's some tactical combination at the end for white, but I don't see anything. I got sort of diddly in terms of ideas as a follow-up there. I want to have something. It feels so positionally nice with those shattered black pawns. Like I just want to play like knight d4 and target all his weaknesses, but I don't think it's really working out. But before abandoning this d5 idea, let's say d5, ed, and maybe I don't have to go back to c3. Maybe I have other options. So for instance, I think I can play knight d2, which looks really kind of silly to me, but black's pawns, again, they just seem so bad to me that I can imagine playing knight to d4, this knight that I just retreated to d2 to b3, and black's pawns are so shattered here that I think white should be better. So d5, ed, I think I can even get away with knight d2 here, and I think that white can be better because black's pawns are so shattered. So I have a feeling I'm missing something, to be honest, but so far my inclination is still that d5 should be appealing for white. It shatters black's pawns and it stops black from playing knight b6 to d5, something like that, and achieving a good position. But maybe there's something better here in this initial position. So my first inclination as an alternative is maybe I can just play knight to c3, and I'm threatening to take on b5, and maybe I can play d5 with more support now that I've got this knight there. But after knight c3, as I'm looking at it, it seems like black could just play bishop b4. He gets the same pin we were just looking at, and I haven't even achieved that shattering of his pawns. So that looks rather innocuous at best to me. I can't see that that's any good. So, any alternatives for white? I mentioned in the very beginning maybe there's this idea of c4 just trying to open things up on the queen side. And I'm not convinced by this on an initial glance. Yeah, this is really hard for me to believe in. It seems like it's a good way to take advantage of this thrust with b5, but I don't know that that's true. After c4, I think black could just take, and after queen takes, I think just knight b6. You tap the queen moves away, then you drop that knight into d5, you have rook b8. I like black a lot in that position. There's a lot of potential actually for me to like black here, even though white seems so centralized and he's got, you know, the d4 pawn giving him some space. If black consolidates, I love that he's got the bishop and he might have some holes to drop his knight into. So there's the potential, I think, for black to be better, which is why I think maybe something sort of drastic like d5 might be justified here, even if it's not guaranteeing white too much. So I don't think c4 works. I don't think knight c3 bishop b4 works. I could potentially see something like rook d3 and just rook b3, something like this, and just going after that pawn on b5 and just trying to find a more active home for this rook, which seems active in the center of the board but really isn't actually doing anything at the moment. I don't really believe in it though. I think after rook d3, black could just play knight b6 because the queen's blocked from attacking b5 at the moment, and then after rook b3, I think that you might just be able to drop that knight into c4 directly. You might play a6. Not really buying it. Black's ready to play this rook to c8 and then have a lot of control of the c file. It seems like black has good resources there. Other alternatives? I don't see anything else. Well, maybe one other idea. Maybe this idea of just knight to d2, knight to b3, hitting both of these weaknesses, and then you just try and drop in on either a5 or c5. That doesn't seem bad to me, but black has a couple of pieces controlling c5 now. I don't think that knight d2, knight b3 wins. I think it's alright for white. I think my inclination is to play d5, shatter the pawns, and just play the position after that. You're not winning, but I think that I would take white even having sacrificed a pawn after d5 because black's pawns are so badly placed. And white has potentially good squares for his pieces, a lot of central lines, just a lot of targets. I like d5, and I think that white should be better. as an alternative. I don't think is as good, but I think you might play knight d2, knight to b3, and try and drop in on c5 or a5 as a slower, more positional approach. So, well, let's see. I think I might be missing something here. That's all I see in this position. I got no more ideas here. So this solution is correct, and we see the main points here. The first point is that black is near consolidating, but he doesn't have control of d5 now, so white is better. And the second point is that white can strike with one d5. But I did miss here the follow-up point, this knight eg5 move. So I looked at knight c3, bishop b4, and knight d2, which are unfortunately a little insipid, and I missed this idea of moving that knight to g5, and then after f take g5 you can play queen take e7. And that's much stronger than the way I played it, but still the d5 idea is quite strong because of shattering black's pawn structure, and it's much stronger if followed up the correct way rather than the way that I saw to follow it up.